we will end the show by talking about this. Normally for when we remember actors or directors or anybody associated with film or pop culture who have died, we start the show with it. But this one, on top of being shocking, I think there's more to unpack with this one than there is a lot of them. Because a lot of the time, especially recently, the people who have died have either been sick, like publicly sick, or they've been old enough to the point where it was more or less, as sad to say, expected, but no less sad. This death, as I said in opening the show, really floored me. Morgan Spurlock, the documentarian behind Super Size Me, most famously, the Oscar nominated movie where Morgan Spurlock underwent the experiment of eating McDonald's 3 times a day for 30 days, passed away at the age of 53 after a private cancer battle. There's no other sort of development related to it. We don't know what kind of cancer it was. I think it would be almost cruel to speculate publicly, at least. But if that name has really escaped your mind over the last several years, nobody could blame you, because and I wonder because of how just much of a hurricane in itself the Me Too movement was. I don't think it got lost in the shuffle, but I do think it had tangible. I think it had very clear impact. And it was odd timing too for a career move. But in December 2017, just as Spurlock was getting ready to release Super Size Me 2, Holy Chicken. By the way, there is a Super Size Me sequel. Joe did not know
I did
that.
not.
A lot of people didn't know that either. A lot of people didn't know that. Um, and this is probably why. Spurlock wrote a blog post. It was on Twitter. It was like on one of those sites like TwitDeck, or back when you could like write essays on Twitter on like a separate third party site. It was right in the middle of the Me Too movement. And he came out and he basically admitted to like years, decades of sexual harassment of employees, misconduct of employees. He got accused of rape when he was in college. I mean, it was a damning self admission and confession. Initially, I remember reading it, not only being shocked, but I remember reading it like thinking two things. I thought like, is his next project going to tackle the Me Too movement, and he needs to get this out there in order to like absolve himself and like be completely transparent? Because and I'll talk more in a minute, but he's was always a documentarian where you didn't really know what was next, and that was one of the things I did admire about him as a filmmaker. But it completely, it completely killed his career. Super Size Me 2 got indefinitely delayed. YouTube Red was going to distribute it. They didn't. The movie didn't come out for another year, almost a year and a half. That release got canceled. He stepped down from his production company, Warrior Poets, and then that company folded. And he basically was never heard from again in the public sphere.
Yeah.
Super Size Me 2 had a super low key release in like September of 2019. Clearly, I feel like I'm
Wow, in
only
2019?
2019. Yeah.
Oh my God.
It came out a year and a half after it was supposed to come out. And again, no, evidently nobody paid attention to it besides me. But basically that completely annihilated his career. And the next time you basically heard about him was when he died 6 or 7 years later,
Yeah.
last week. The one of the things, and he's got obviously with just that, he's got a complicated legacy. But looking at him as a documentarian, first off, Super Size Me was oddly one of my favorite movies as a kid. And I can't,
Hmm.
I rewatched it late on Saturday night. I rewatched it, which is probably like the 15th time I've seen it. I can quote a documentary. That's how many times I've seen it. Um, the thing about it was, I think what captivated me, I mean, number one, McDonald's wins every kid's heart over. When I was like 9 when the thing came out and saw it. Uh, McDonald's wins every kid over. Number two, the movie had a banger soundtrack.
It did.
So much so they released an OST of it.
Nice.
Like and I have the fucking soundtrack too. That's how much I loved it. I love the soundtrack of the movie. And the other thing I guess I forgot to mention too was about that essay he released, was the fact that that essay basically invalidated Supersize Me, because he admitted and sort of like blamed in a way like the assault and the misconduct. He was like questioning why he would even do that as somebody who wouldn't recognize himself as somebody to do it. He said something to the tune of, was it because I've been an alcoholic for 30 and haven't been sober a day in my life for the last 30 years? And if you remember, one of the most damning realizations of Super Size Me, and part of what made it such an explosive documentary, was the fact that it wasn't really previously thought that a high fat or trans fat laden diet could lead to liver complications. Because that's the big thing of the movie is towards the third act of the movie, the doctor starts saying like your liver is sick.
Yeah.
Like you have like the one guy even says too, he's like, you have the liver of a binge drinking alcoholic.
Yeah.
And he never admits that in the documentary. I don't even know if he drank during, you don't even know if he drank during the documentary.
If he did, cameras weren't rolling, that's for sure.
Oh, obviously not. And then you look at some of the things, like I remember even thinking as a kid, it's weird. I'm like, you threw up. You must not eat this food. His girlfriend was vegan. I'm like, you must not eat this food regularly if you're throwing up from a quarter pounder with cheese meal. But then you look at like some of the complications he has. Like he gets twitchy, he gets sort of like addicted to it, he gets the shakes,
Yeah.
he sweats. And part of that obviously comes from a fatty diet, but then you wonder too, you're like, are you going through withdrawals? If you
Yeah.
really did quit drinking, are you going through withdrawals during this experiment? And that's what invalidates that movie. So I look at it as like a piece of pop entertainment and like a cultural zeitgeist touchstone at the time.
Yeah.
Because it's not really a very deep movie either. But if you look at his future movies too, he did a documentary called "Where in the World is Osama bin Laden," which is a very odd movie. But the funniest part of the movie was, though, at the end of the movie, I only seen it once, but at the end of the movie, Morgan Spurlock like doesn't want to go into this area of Pakistan where there's signs basically saying we can't guarantee your safety, and he's got a newborn at home.
Yeah.
And so he turns around, and the end voiceover is him saying, if I had to guess, I think bin Laden is hiding in the tribal lands of Pakistan near a town named Peshawar, Pakistan. 3 years after the movie comes out, the United States conducts the operation that kills bin Laden. He was found fucking 200 kilometers away from Peshawar in Abbottabad.
Morgan found Osama bin Laden, bro.
He came damn close.
What the
He
fuck? They
came,
didn't go over that in Zero Dark 30.
he came damn close, 200 kilometers away from where he opined that he might be based on his research. I'm like, I remember that, and I'm like, damn, this guy's got a little more attention, a little more attention than
I
you
want to
think.
get in contact with the character that Jessica Chastain played as in Zero Dark 30 and just be like, all right, be honest. Did you watch Where in the World is Osama bin Laden? You went, hold on a minute, that actually might be true.
Other movies he did, I think probably his de facto best movie is The Greatest Movie Ever Sold.
I saw that
Wonderful
one. That was
Princess.
on Netflix for like the longest time when Netflix first came out. And
It was.
I was like, oh my god! I'm like, this is the guy from Super Size Me. I love that movie. That movie's great.
That was a pretty good movie about product placement. He makes a documentary about product placement funded entirely by product placement.
Yeah.
He did Comic-Con episode 4, A Fan's Hope, which was basically sort of a clip show reel of Comic-Con, but still very touching. He did a documentary on male grooming called Mansome, that got some attention at the time. And he also did the One Direction movie, This Is Us, the 3D concert
Are you
movie.
serious?
He directed
Wow.
that One Direction, This Is Us, which was not a half bad movie. And then he also made the other documentary, and this was probably his worst in my opinion. Was a movie called Rats. It was about rat infestations in big cities.
Oh.
And I know, right? Like, I will say, for a guy, he did not get as much credit for as versatile as he was.
Yeah.
A lot of these documentaries were very low key, which is kind of ironic, being that Super Size Me was such a huge hit. And I think you said this too when I sent you the link that he died. And I want you to kind of go into this too. You even said like Super Size Me, you think got a lot of people paying attention to documentaries in the mainstream light.
Yeah. No, I do. I think it was the documentary that helped put documentaries into theaters as much as we get now with like the what the hell was it, my neighbor, what was it, oh my god, A Lovely Day in the Neighborhood.
Oh, well, Won't You Be My
Won't
Neighbor?
You Be My Neighbor? Thank you. Yeah, Won't You Be My Neighbor? The documentary about that clock tower sniper, where like half of it's like animated, like they recreate some of the scenes through like animation and everything.
Oh yeah, what the hell is that called? I'm friends with the director of that on Facebook too. I really should know.
And like I think that movie really made it go, hey, wait, documentaries can go to theaters and they can make money. And I think it is because of the cultural impact that Super Size Me had. Dude, I mean, like, I watched that movie in school like 6 times. I watched it in 5th grade. We watched it in 6th grade. I watched it in 7th grade. I watched it in 8th grade. And we watched it one more time in high school for health class.
It was a school movie. I
I,
saw it twice in school.
I remember just sitting there. I'm like, holy shit! I'm like, I've seen this movie 5 times just because of school. Like, and I shit you not though. Like, when that eventually came to Netflix, it became one of my favorite things to watch just because I think it's a fun documentary. Now, yeah, looking back on it, yes, there are problems in that documentary in terms of the research that goes into it and what we know now about Morgan in terms of his health. Um, that we know some of the results are definitely skewed because of that with his liver and everything. But there's still stuff he brings up in that documentary that I think is fun, or actually, like, pretty good point when it comes to the McDonald's Corporation itself and how much of a chokehold it does have on, like, the youth and everything. Um, I was like, it does bring up that, and it does a good job covering that. But at the end of the day, I thought it was an entertaining documentary, which
That's
is,
the word I use. I think he was a good entertainer.
yeah,
Like I think and I almost look at him more of an entertainer than a documentarian,
yeah,
especially when you look at the movies. Like it's easy to it's I mean, I saw One Direction This Is Us in theaters when it came out. But the reason I think a lot of people don't know he did that movie was I don't remember him being a part of that documentary. I think he just directed it. He didn't involve himself
yeah.
in
I
the
mean, like,
story.
if his old ass came on camera, a bunch of girls in the audience would be like, "Who the hell's he?"
That's exactly right. Whereas, like, he was always at this, all the documentaries he did, he almost had this Michael Moorish quality
Yeah,
about him where he would insert himself into the story. It was about him eating McDonald's, him finding bin Laden, him getting product placement deals to fund a movie about product placement.
yeah,
Like, he was the central figure in all of his documentaries. Rats, I think he's only the narrator. But, and Manson, he's directly involved in too, I remember. So that's why I think of him more as an entertainer than I do a documentarian. And that's where I think Supersize Me and like I could never ethically review that movie, like in terms of just like being unbiased. You know what I mean? Like I can't really do that. Republished my review of Supersize Me 2 on my website when he died,
yeah,
because I was like I could be far more objective about this. I didn't grow up with it, and I didn't have the fucking CD. Like, you know what I mean? It's hard to go back and review those movies that
yeah.
were foundational for you in a way, especially when it's a movie like
God,
Super Size Me,
dude,
which you might think of as
I
bullshit.
remember in 5th grade when I watched it for the very first time, and the teacher asked the class, "Does anybody here eat McDonald's every day?" And there was a girl, like, I'm not making fun of her by saying this, but she was suffering from obesity problems and everything, and she
Sure.
raised her hands and she said it's because her family works long shifts. It's easy and affordable and everything. And I think, like, to me as a kid, I'm listening to this. I'm like, well, I mean, isn't that something we should be paying attention to? The fact that, like, Americans are working this long and to feed their family, this is the only outcome, which the documentary does actually mention at one point. They just don't go into it, but a person does bring up, one of the people he interviews talks about how, like, yeah, I mean, there's just times where it's like, I work all day and then I have to go home and feed the kids. It's like I stop off at Wendy's, I stop off at Burger King, I stop off at McDonald's because it's just an easy solution. And instead, what the teacher took away from that when, all right, you see, you better not eat McDonald's because, and
Oh
I'm like,
no.
oh no, and it led
No.
into like a whole bad thing at my school. Like, it was just terrible.
I
um
mean, it's like you don't shame the kid who's kind like I remember reading there was a meme years and years ago, probably 10 years ago I saw it.
yeah,
It's like there's an unwritten ethics code that
I mean,
even
what'd you expect
kids
from a
know.
gym teacher though? I mean,
And I know like when kids can be dicks, but I think when you get to like late middle school, early high school, it's like you don't make fun of somebody with like crooked teeth. You don't make
yeah,
fun of somebody who's got holes in their shoes. Like there's a certain unwritten ethics code that I think most people, certainly most adults, but most kids even know. Like, and then I hear shit like that and I'm like, that's shameful.
yeah. But yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, going back to the documentary, I mean, like, yeah, every time I watch it though, yeah, it's just entertaining as hell, man. Like, it's just like there's a certain energy to it. It's got some great editing to it, where
it does.
it cuts to, whether it be still images or the interview or just clips. It's
animation.
yeah, I mean it's a well crafted documentary. It's
Yes.
entertaining and it keeps your attention. I mean, like hell, the thing was nominated for best picture, not best picture, best documentary for a reason. And hell, it is the documentary that got me interested in watching more documentaries. I mean, I know you have people who like, they watch the ID channel, like, you watch all the murder documentaries, but this was something that made me go, hey, that was kind of cool that we looked at something as big as McDonald's and we dissected it in all these different ways. And it made me want to go and pursue watching other documentaries down the line as a kid too, where I was like, hey, like if I saw them on Netflix, like the one funded by Chipotle, Food Inc., that was another one I was like, let me check that
Yeah.
out. I wish I knew about Super Size Me too, but it eventually got me to watch the greatest movie ever sold. Hell, it's what makes me pay attention to them for Sleepless with stuff like Class Action Park, the high
Movie
school
Pass Movie Crash
movie
next
pass
week.
crash, which we're reviewing next week, and then what was the most recent one we reviewed? The high school footballers,
BS
BSI.
High.
Like, it's just like it made me pay attention to those kind of releases because it's like we don't get them in theaters as much as we do, and as much as we like, I love something like Won't You Be My Neighbor. Documentaries in theaters they're far too very few, and they're mostly put on streaming now because streaming is just the more optimal place for it to get a lot of views. But
It's
I,
true.
I, I always thank Supersize Me for making me as interested as I am in documentaries.
And it's sad too. I mean, obviously, Spurlock deserves condemnation for the stuff he admitted
Yeah,
to doing. But the part of me that will always be shocked, and I mean, it's sad when a life is cut short at 53 years old because of
shit,
cancer.
yeah,
It's sad in that respect. What I would love to know, though, are the movies, and I doubt it'll come out because he's been divorced 3 times. So I don't really know of anybody in his corner, and he left his production company and it folded.
yeah,
So I don't even know. I think he probably internalized a lot of these. I don't think these will ever come out, but I would love to know. He feels like somebody I would have interviewed too, with the kind of people I get on the radio show. He feels like somebody I would have interviewed too, which bugs me because I've been thinking about this. Is like, what were the movies after he came out with that, and nobody would touch him. Nobody would touch him for a movie or anything like that. What excuse me, what were the documentaries he wanted to make but
yeah.
couldn't? What were the movies or what were the projects he was planning on
And
doing
with
after the
how
sequel to
versatile he
Super
was,
Size
like
Me?
you're saying, who knows, man? He could
You
have
couldn't
done.
even guess.
He could have done something on theme parks. He could have done something on the NFL. We don't know.
Yeah, and like you talk about his documentary like basis. Like, you go to Michael Moore. Michael Moore is a political filmmaker. You know what I mean? He's
Yeah,
attacked the healthcare industry, the Bush administration, capitalism as a whole. He's got his lean. Most documentarians have their zone that they operate in. Once in a while, they might deviate. A lot of the 30 for 30 directors, too, like Ron Shelton, who
yeah,
made Jordan Rides the Bus, was a sports movie director. Like, there's a lean that you have with documentary filmmakers. You never knew what the hell Morgan Spurlock was going to do.
yeah,
And that's what bothers me in some way. Is it's like, what were the movies that we're never going to get? What was he looking into, trying to maybe get made, or saying I'll eventually make this? um that's what's gonna, I think, bother me. That's what I think is one of the reasons his death impacted me so much, besides me being a fan and besides Supersize Me being foundational in my love for documentaries from a young age. I think it's the fact that, like, you just never knew what he was gonna do,
yeah,
and now he won't, and now it's done. It's just gone like that out of thin air.
yeah. It's unfortunate. Because like you said, I mean, 53 is just too young. In general, I know we're butting up against time. The last thing I'll
Yep.
just say is like, yeah, I was sad to see it, and you even saying like, what would be next that he would do. I mean, you got to sit there and wonder because it's like, yeah, the guy would almost tackle anything. We don't know honestly, but at the end of the day, sad to see it go. Very complicated history of his life when you look back on it and everything. But still, 53, yeah, way too young.
Rest in peace to Morgan Spurlock. One final thing before we go about Spurlock, though, that I remember reading when it came out was I remember, like, to sound like a hipster, I remember when the original Catfish documentary came out.
Oh, that's
I
another one
remember
that came out in
I
theaters.
I remember when it premiered, and it premiered at a film festival, I think Tribeca,
Yeah.
and because I was following it at the time in high school because I really wanted to watch it, and I remember Morgan Spurlock after the movie, because this made headlines. Spurlock came up to Henry Joost, Ariel Schulman, and Nev Schulman, the three guys behind the Catfish documentary, later the MTV series. He came up to them and said, "Excellent job, guys. That was the best fake documentary I've ever seen."
Oh my god.
I just that just popped into my head. I remember reading that, and that was after I had seen it. Though that was I didn't see that initially, but it was a story back when that movie premiered.
Yeah.
And Nev Schulman missed a big opportunity to say, "Hey, pot, leave the kettle alone." And missed a bold opportunity. He definitely was the bigger man.